So we have what makes a contract valid, what makes it enforceable, what are the differences between this, what are the rights of the people involved in a contract, what's the difference between these two contracts, and we'll go through all of this. And I'll also email you these slides that you're going to use them as flashcards in terms of you'll be able to look at them either on your phone or on your computer. You will not be able to print them out. So look at them just like your flashcards. So then we have the other topic on the test is, when do I know we have a contract? What happens when people don't do what they're supposed to do? How do we eliminate it? And then what's the difference between this type of a contract? So my style is gonna go more like scenarios, and then it goes through all of this, an offer, so on. You want to sell your house, then you're going to sign what is known as a listing agreement. And remember here, I'm going to be sending you these slides. So probably if you're writing your notes, it's just really something that you want to make sure that you're going to remember. So when you're dealing with selling the house, they're going to sign what is known as a listing agreement. The day that you decide to buy a house, then you and I would sign something known as the buyer agreement. However, here is, these agreements are between the broker and the client. So what does that mean? When you're ready to buy, and let's say I'm going to be your agent, technically all I am is the middle person or the minion or the worker bee who's working on behalf of my broker. So if, for example, I work for Keller Williams, then you're signing the agreement with Keller Williams, and then Keller Williams and I have an agreement. I'm the one who's going to show you the houses, you buy the house, and then my commission is going to come from my broker, the broker of Keller Williams.
Okay.
So here, remember that the agreements are between the broker and the client. That is key. They're not between the agent, the minion, and you. The agreement is between you and the broker. Okay. And then when you're buying the house that you've seen, that agreement for you to buy the house and for the seller to sell you the house is known as a sales contract. That one is between you two, you, the seller, and the buyer.
Okay.
If you've ever rented, then you know about a lease. It's between the landlord. So here the wording in the test might be leaseor, and then you, the tenant, would be known as the leasee. For the people who are doing property management, they also have an agreement with the owner. And then sometimes, very rare, we have people who do rent to own. So rent to own is where you're paying the owner a certain amount of money for you to eventually own the house either 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But instead of you getting the money and borrowing it from the bank, the owner is acting as the bank. So here the trick part of it is when you're doing rent to own on the test, they might call that agreement a land contract. So land contract, when you see land contract, remember that is rent to own.
Okay.
When you do that, the buyer, think of the vending machine. So if you're a little bit familiar with the vending machine, if I have a vending machine in my office, I don't technically own that vending machine. Someone comes in and puts in the stuff into the vending machine, and then, the person is just leasing that space. So if you think of a vending machine, and there's a reason why I use the vending machine, is when you do rent to own, you, the buyer who's doing owner financing, who's doing rent to own, you're known as the vendee, and the owner is known as the vendor. So think of the vending machine. You don't technically own it unless you buy it. The vendor is the seller who's doing the owner financing with you. And then the vendee is you, the buyer doing rent to own.
Okay.
Now we're going to go through scenarios. So I'll be going through different parts of this. First, we get into different ways in which contracts are created. So express means words. Express is words that are either spoken or in writing. Express is words spoken or in writing. So if I say, for example, what we have is not really expressed because we don't have anything in writing, but what type of agreement we have between you and I would be which one? This one, implied. You saw an email or you saw an advertisement, you contacted me, you said, Brenda, let's meet on Saturday, let's go through this exam prep. This is all actions. We never really signed an agreement. So what we have is what is called an implied contract.
Okay.
Express is when you're ready to buy, contact me, an agent, and say, Brenda, I want you to help me buy a house. That's express because you stated those words. And then I will say, perfect. We can meet on Zoom at 12. I'll go through the process and we'll go through the paperwork for you to sign that I'm the one for you. This is all express because you stated the words that, Brenda, I want you to help me buy a house, and then we got it in writing.
Okay.
Then we go to the other types, and sometimes it's more than one type of a contract. I'll connect the dots by the time we are done. Statutes of frauds, real quick, is the one that says, let's avoid fraud. And how will we avoid fraud? Is by having things in writing. The best way to avoid fraud is to have things in writing. Statutes of fraud says things need to be in writing. In order for you to sue each other, a judge needs to see that the agreement was in writing. Statutes of frauds in writing. Now we get to the other type of contract. So we covered how is it created. Did somebody say something or did somebody do something, express or implied? Now we get into bilateral or unilateral. Bilateral just means a promise for a promise. They're two promises. It doesn't mean people. So bilateral could be there are 7 sellers and there are 3 buyers. That's still a bilateral contract because about those 3 buyers says hey, we want to buy your house, Mr. and Mrs. Sellers. So there could be 7 people that own the house, and there could be 3 people that want to buy a house. It's not 2 sellers, 2 buyers. It's not 1 seller, 1 buyer. A bilateral is I promise to buy your house for $350,000, and then seller says, "Great, I promise to sell you my house for this amount." So a bilateral is a promise for a promise. This is what you have with your employer. You and your employer have a bilateral contract which says you are qualified to do this job. They have given you a job, and then on your end, you're saying, I'm going to do the job, and then you're going to pay me. That's a bilateral contract. Okay? And then unilateral. Unilateral would be the day when your boss says, hey, Marcus, okay, I don't know how many people work where you are. Let's assume it's 50 people, and your boss says for the month of September, anyone who does this, and this, and this, I'm gonna give you a bonus of $3,000 for September. That's a unilateral contract. It's one-sided because your boss made this announcement. However, the only person who's going to get that 3,000 is the one that does everything that is on that checklist. If no one does all of these things, then your boss doesn't give out the $3,000. Okay, so that's and I'm sorry, I assumed, are you at work where you're employed or are you self-employed? Okay, so you're employed. Okay, so hopefully that helped. Ask if you have any questions. Did that help?
Yes, ma'am. I pretty much have a good understanding for like bilateral contracts and unilateral contracts.
Okay,
And pretty much this is just, go over the stuff again.
say it again. Sorry, it's kind of not clear.
I pretty much have a good understanding for this already,
Okay,
but it's good to do it again.
okay, good. So bilateral, these are the examples, and you'll see that in the slides. Let's see. Are you good with these? Executed and executory.
Executed is pretty much a contract that's already been executed, and executory is one that pretty much is in the process of being executed.
Perfect. Yep. So executed, things are done. Executed, we are still pending. Good. Okay. How about this one? In order for us to say that we have a contract, we need 5 things. What are they?
The buyer and the seller.
No, in order for you to have a contract with your boss, in order for you to have a contract with your landlord, in order for you to have a contract with a buyer, any contract between you and a lawyer, between you and an accountant, any contract needs 5 things in order for us to say it's a valid contract. What are the 5?
You have to be competent.
Yep, good.
Has to be in writing.
In writing is only because so put that on the side.
You have to be in the right state of mind. Is
Yes.
that still competent?
Yep. So you need these offer and acceptance, right? I need to make you an offer. You need to agree, and I need to know about your agreement. So offer and acceptance, and then the other side knows that it was accepted. There needs to be consideration, something of value. There needs to be sound mind, and then we need to be competent, which is of age. And the last thing, I'm sorry, legal. And then the last thing is we're all of age. 18 years or older is what most states will have. So these are the 5 elements. So here we go a little bit sidetrack. Now, when you mentioned about needs to be in writing, I'll connect the dots for you in about 3 minutes. So let's segue a little bit to the deposit. A deposit is sort of like if you're renting right now, you probably put a security deposit to hold the apartment for you, and in order when you move out, hopefully you're going to get the entire money back. When you're buying the house, there's what we call the honest money deposit, which is not required. The amount is negotiable, and it is used as liquidated damages. So whatever the amount is going to be is negotiable between the buyer and the seller. It is not required for us to sell the house or for you to buy the house. Real quick, if the broker is going to hold it, then we know that it cannot commingle, mix with his other money, and he cannot use it for something else other than what it's intended for. Are we good with the deposit side?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now we get into valid, void, voidable, unenforceable, and enforceable. So real quick with valid is where it has all 5. So what's the difference between a void contract and a voidable contract?
Avoidable contract is when it doesn't have all 5, when pretty much somebody breaches the contract.
Did you say that's a void contract or voidable?
Avoidable. When someone doesn't have all 5 parts of the contract.
Okay. So let me massage that a little bit. What you mentioned is a void contract. A void contract is the one that's missing one of the 5. So a void contract is where we don't have consideration. We don't have, from the very beginning, we never had offer and acceptance. It's missing one of these 5. That's a void contract. Avoidable, and this is why I break it down, avoidable, this is a contract that's able to be voided. It's not automatic, but it's able to be voided. So what does that mean? We could have a contract with a minor, but if no one says up, if no one knows, that's a valid contract. So voidable is where it has this thing that when we get to a stop sign, we would then need to determine, do we go left and cancel it because it's a void contract, or the person proves that yes, they're over 18, so now we go right and we continue on. So a voidable contract is one that is able to be voided, but the person needs to speak up. There's a possibility of it being voided out. So that's why anytime in the test, there's questions about drugs and alcohol, duress, a minor, misrepresentation, or mental illness. The answer is always going to be voidable because there's a possibility. If I can prove that I'm a minor, then there's a possibility it's going to be voided out. If I can prove that I was under duress when I signed that contract, I was really being forced to sign it, then there's a possibility of it being voided out. So voidable, it's able to be voided. Did that help?
Pretty much when person does speak up and say, yes, I was underage, it's a void contract. The contract is now void. Avoidable is when the person doesn't speak up, but if it does come to light, then it could be voided.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So voidable, reasonable doubt. So voidable has reasonable doubt. So again, if you present it, yeah. probably the person is not going to go to jail or the person is going to go to jail. Yep. So avoidable, there's a possibility. Yes. Now let's go to the next one, which is we covered valid, void, voidable. We've covered express and implied. We covered executed and executory. Here's where I'm bringing back your point that you mentioned, that it's in writing. So there's a difference between a valid contract and enforceable contract. The only difference is that enforceable contract is valid in writing. I can sue you. That's the difference. So enforceable contract is a valid contract in writing. I can now take you to court and sue you. Unenforceable contract is a valid contract, not in writing. I cannot sue you. So this would be a handshake. Hey, I'm gonna fix your car. So this also ends up being what? It's implied because it's an action. It's not in writing, but it still has offer and acceptance. I'm gonna fix your car for $350,000. You okay? Or rather, sorry, $350, and you okay with that? There's consideration. You're all over 18. You're all of sound mind. But this is a handshake. So unenforceable contract, not in writing. A valid contract, not in writing.
You said enforceable is still a valid contract, only difference is it's not in writing.
Yes. Yes. Unenforceable contract, valid, not in writing. Okay, let's see what else we have. You good with time is of the essence?
Time of the essence is pretty much you agreeing to take care of it in a timely manner.
Yes, and timely specified, because sometimes they might have the word reasonable time and you might again pick that. Time is of the essence, it's specified. If you say 10 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock, not reasonable. What else? What other terminology do I have? Oh yeah, assignment and novation. This one I summarize. Assignment is you transferring your rights to someone else. Let's give examples. You're buying a house as yourself, and as you're buying the house, you contact an attorney or you get in touch with an attorney and he says, hey, you're better off putting the property in the name of LLC. So now instead of buying the house in your name, you're going to assign it to the LLC. You're transferring your rights from one person to another. That's assignment.
Isn't that how people wholesale property?
Say it again.
Isn't that how people wholesale property?
Yes. You're right. Yes. So that's assignment, yes. Where you're saying, hey, I'm gonna be looking for the buyer. Technically, it's not in your name. You're transferring the rights of that contract to someone else. Yes, perfect. Novation, nova, new. Novation, nova, new contract. So all that means is, examples I use is we started the contract with 2 people on it. One person did something. Now we have to get a whole new contract with just one person. So novation, nova, new. That's what you're looking for.
Explain that for me, novation.
So novation is new contract. Nova, new. Nova, new. So for example, you and I are on the contract together. I mess up my credit. Now the contract can only be in your name. So we're going to do a novation, a new contract with just your name. You good with breach?
Pretty much when someone doesn't live up to their part of the contract.
Now, if they don't, what are the remedies? So if somebody doesn't do what they were supposed to do, there are two remedies. One is someone didn't do what they promised to do. One is liquidated damages. So liquidated damages is where the person now gets to keep the deposit. So liquidated damages is option one, where the person either keeps the deposit, or if it is you seeking liquidated damages, you're asking the seller to pay you something. Give me back my money for my home inspection. Give me back money for my appraisal and so on. So that's liquidated damages. Option two is where no, liquidated damages are not enough. Therefore, we're going to sue each other. And when you sue each other, the actual court case or suit is called suit for specific performance. So suit for specific performance is the other option for a breach. Here, what you want is transfer of the property. So seller is forced to sell the house to the buyer. Buyer is forced to buy the house. That's a suit for specific performance.
And you also take partial performance.
I guess maybe in other states that's what they call it, but what I've seen majority of the time, okay, maybe focus on the word performance, because somebody didn't perform on the contract, therefore I'm suing them. Yes, you could do that. But I haven't heard the word partial. That's a new one for me. Let's see. So we have breach, liquidated damages, I spoke about that. Statutes of limitations is what? Limitation on how long you can sue each other. So types of contracts, I think I went through this already. They're between the broker. Okay, so I went through that. I don't know why I repeated here. Okay, what's your understanding of equitable title?
Is that when you have equity in your home?
So what does that mean?
Pretty much, I think it's assessed value minus how much you still owe the property.
Okay, so that's equity. Equitable title, if I'm going to borrow what you already said, so equity, yes, is the understanding that I borrowed this, I've now brought it down, so now I have that big chunk that is I could use to borrow against and so forth. Equitable is where you have some rights. So equitable, anytime you see title, I tell people think of right. It's not really something you can touch. You just have rights to it. So what do we mean? Before you get to settlement, so let me step back. You saw a house, it's 113 Washington Avenue. You put in an offer. Now you have some rights. Those rights are known as equitable title. From the moment the seller says yes to your contract to the time you get to settlement, you have some rights That's known as equitable title. This is also what, Alia, you mentioned the phrase of wholesaling. This is what the person has that allows them to do the assignment. So this is what you have when you have what type of a contract? Executory, right? Where things are pending. This is the rights that you have that allows you to come in, do home inspection, assign it, all of that. Once you get to the final step of you getting the keys to the house, then now you have legal title. So once we get to the executed contract, at settlement, it's all done. You, the buyer, now have legal title to this property.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Contingency, things are pending, right? Whatever needs to be done needs to be tackled. These are things that need to be done in order for us to move forward. So when we get to that stop sign, do we have the home inspection done? Good. Keep going. Another stop sign. Do we have all the financing done? Good. Keep going. Another stop sign. Did it appraise? So all of these are the stop signs that we have to go through in order for us to get to settlement. What do you know about option or rent with the option to buy?
Pretty much you're renting, and the landlord has, if he before he sells, he has to give you the option to buy the house before he sells it to someone else.
Right. Okay. So it's a unilateral type of a contract. It's one-sided. You're not obligated to take that particular choice. You can still continue staying on as a tenant. Earlier on, I started with installment contract or land contract. Remember, that is owner financing. The owner is the vending machine giving you access to live in his house. When you pay him off, then now you get legal title owning the property. Still on contracts, the other topic is type of agreements. So probably hash out the different type of listing agreements. You have the exclusive right to sell. What do you remember about this one?
Exclusive right to sell is when the licensee is pretty much the only one who can sell the house.
Okay, and what else?
The buyer cannot hire another licensee, and regardless of who sells the house, the licensee still gets paid.
Correct. Yes. So exclusive one. So the way I break it down, exclusive one, and then right to sell. Broker has right to that commission no matter what. Broker has right to that commission no matter what. Good. How about exclusive agency?
Pretty much it's like the same thing, but if the seller sells a house themselves, they keep the commission.
Perfect. Yep. And then you know about open listing.
Open listing is that the seller can have how many licensees as he wants, and whoever sells the house gets the commission.
Good. And then net listing, you know that the seller has to say, I want to make this amount. Whatever is over is yours. Good. We probably finish off with leases. So leases are still a type of contracts, and we have 4 different types of leasehold estates. So we start with the first one, estate for years. What do you remember about this type of a lease?
Pretty much it's you lease periodically for like years, and they just pretty much renew after the year is done.
It say, does it renew or it ends?
Yeah.
It ends, right? Okay. So this one is periodic. It could start for month to month, a week, days or years. It has a beginning date and end date. There's no notice required. So what I use this one for, just for me to differentiate, because a lot of the times the apartments always give you the option to renew. Estate for years, I lean more on the side of a vacation spot, whether it's a hotel or weekly rental somewhere in Ocean City. If I'm going to be going to check in at Four Seasons, I'll check in on Thursday at 3 p.m. or Friday at 3 p.m. I'm going to check in, and it's good till Sunday at 12. This is a stayed for years. On Sunday at 12, I don't need to give them a notice. I just check out. It has a beginning date and end date. Periodic tenancy is the next one. This one automatically renews. Periodic tenancy, it continues renewing until someone says stop. So this is more.
It just keeps going.
Mhm. Think of this as a subscription.
Gotcha.
And then estate at will. This one, we never really specified how long the time frame is going to be. You moved in, I'm helping you as a friend. We never really discussed how long it's going to be. So this one will continue until one of us says stop. And it's one of the only type of a leasehold that ends when one of us dies. State at suffering. This one is probably the simplest one. Somebody's suffering, usually the landlord, because the tenant has stayed longer than they were supposed to. Now, when we talk probably more of payments to a lease, there are three types of leases in regards to payment. What are the differences?
Percentage lease pretty much is where after a certain amount they get a percentage of the earnings.
Yes.
Net lease when you pay the three net, which is I forgot. Well, gross lease is when everything is included into the lease, right?
Yes.
And then net lease is when you are paying one of the three nets with your lease.
Okay. Yeah. So it could be that you're paying rent plus maintenance of the outside. So most of net is probably like where you are right now. Your employer is probably paying net to where they're paying rent, and then they're responsible for the outside parking, trash, snow removal, landscaping. That's a net lease. So the way I remember this is gross is more of me on the residential side with an apartment. Net is more on the commercial side because they pay the rent plus the maintenance of the building and the outside. Percentage is more of a kiosk in the mall or a store in the mall. They're going to pay a flat fee plus a percentage of the sale.